My parents made me sleep on the floor while my younger brother got my room because he needed space, so I left without a word. And what happened next left them regretful and ruined. I wish I could say this story begins with something subtle, something you'd have to squint to call cruelty. But no, it starts with a sleeping bag on a hardwood floor and my mom saying, "You're older. You can handle it." I was 17. My younger brother, Caleb, had just turned 14. That summer, he started having what my parents called anxiety episodes. He was always a dramatic kid, but this time it escalated. He'd throw these loud tantrums about not sleeping well, not being able to focus, being overstimulated by sharing space with me. We shared a room since we were kids, bunk beds for a while, then two singles on opposite ends once we hit high school. I wasn't noisy. I wasn't messy. I did my homework, stayed quiet. But somehow, I was the problem. One night, Caleb went full meltdown over me having my desk lamp on while I studied for the SATs. He screamed that he couldn't breathe with me in the room, that he felt trapped. My dad told me to study at the kitchen table. I tried not to argue, but then the next morning, they sat me down and said Caleb was getting the room to himself. They were reorganizing for his mental health. And me? They said I could sleep in the living room. No joke, no discussion, just a pillow and a folded blanket tossed onto the couch, which had a busted spring and dog hair embedded deep into the cushions. No privacy, no door, no explanation to extended family when they visited. If I asked why, my mom just said, "It's only temporary," and my dad added, "You're not paying rent, so don't complain." I didn't say anything. Not then. Not even when the weeks turned into months. I stayed quiet, like I always had. Got up early, showered, packed my bag, and left before anyone else woke up. I worked part-time at the grocery store, stacked shelves in the evening, then came home and tried to sleep through Caleb blasting his gaming headset at 1 a.m. from my old room. If I knocked and asked him to turn it down, he'd yell for mom, and I'd get another lecture about keeping the peace. The thing is, I wasn't some rebellious kid. I didn't drink. I didn't vape. I got a 3.9 GPA and helped tutor the freshman algebra class when our math teacher had surgery. But in my house, Caleb was the sun, and everything else revolved around keeping him calm. I think the moment that really broke me wasn't even about the sleeping arrangement. It was one night in October. I'd just gotten home from work. My back was aching from lifting stock, and I was soaked from the rain. I walked into the kitchen and found Caleb sitting at the table with my headphones on, eating the last of the leftovers I'd saved. I asked him, calmly, if he'd seen my headphones. He said, "They're mine now. Mom said I could have them. You didn't even buy them." I blinked. "What?" I told her I needed them for focus, he shrugged. She said it was fine. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake on the lumpy couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to Caleb laugh from my old room. Something snapped. Not loudly, quietly, like a hairline fracture finally giving way. I waited 2 more months. Applied for as many scholarships as I could. Quietly, secretly. I told no one. I kept my grades up, kept showing up to work, kept pretending like everything was fine. I wasn't fine. I was exhausted. I started sleeping in my car when I couldn't deal with the noise. I'd park behind the grocery store and lay the seat back, listening to the hum of the freezer vents instead of Caleb screaming at Fortnite. Then, one January morning, I opened my email at school and saw it. Full ride scholarship. Out-of-state university. Housing included. I sat there, alone in the library, and felt my throat close up. Not from sadness. From relief so intense it made my hands shake. I didn't tell my parents right away. I waited until 3 weeks before move-in. Walked in after dinner one night and said, "I got a scholarship. I'm leaving next month." My mom's first words were, "You're not taking the car." I didn't ask for the car. My dad asked who was going to help around the house now. I didn't reply. Caleb didn't look up from his phone. That was the last family dinner I sat through. The night before I left, I packed everything I owned into 3 boxes. I didn't say goodbye. I left the key on the kitchen counter. Wrote a note. "Thanks for the floor." I found a door. Then I left. I didn't look back. And they didn't call. Not for months. But life has a funny way of turning. The first morning I woke up in my dorm room, I didn't recognize the silence. It was clean. It didn't buzz with the TV in the next room or Caleb screaming into his headset. It didn't smell like microwave burritos or musty couch cushions. Just fresh sheets and possibility. My roommate wasn't there that weekend. He hadn't moved in yet, So for the first time in what felt like years, I had a door, a bed, a desk, a room where I could breathe without apologizing for it. I stood in the middle of it, not even unpacking for a few minutes, just soaking it in. Classes started the following week, and I threw myself in head first. The scholarship I received was for STEM, data science, to be specific, but I also took a couple creative writing electives just because I could. For the first time, I didn't have to tiptoe around someone else's outbursts to focus. I didn't have to work late shifts just to buy my own supplies or hear my mom say, "We can't afford that right now. Your brother needs a new therapist." I picked up a part-time tutoring job on campus. It barely paid, but I liked it. It gave me purpose. I got along with my professors, stayed up too late helping a classmate debug her project, and spent Saturday mornings in the library, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Still, the silence from home lingered like a bruise. Not once did my parents text. Not even a "did you get there okay?" Not a check-in, not a birthday message. The only person from that side of my life who reached out was my Aunt Marie, my mom's younger sister, who found me on LinkedIn, of all places. She messaged, "Heard you're at Harlan State on a full ride. That's amazing. Proud of you. If you ever need anything, I'm here." I almost cried. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that from someone, anyone. I didn't block my parents. I didn't delete them. But I muted everything. Out of sight. Out of mind. I didn't know them my milestones. In sophomore year, I started working with a professor on a grant-funded project that used machine learning to identify inconsistencies in financial records, basically building a program to flag fraud in small businesses. It was intense, but it clicked. It felt like I was solving something that mattered. My work got noticed by a couple of professors who had startup connections. By the end of junior year, I got invited to intern at a fintech company based out of Chicago. I took the offer, moved over the summer, and for the first time in my life, was earning more than minimum wage. The CEO took a liking to me, said I had quiet aggression, a compliment, I think. He offered to mentor me. And in my final semester of college, I got to lead a prototype team on a side product that went into beta testing. We called it Clean Line. It streamlined audits for small business vendors and flagged suspicious activity with near-perfect accuracy. It worked better than any of us expected. When I graduated, they offered me a job on the spot. And 6 months into that, the CEO said something I'll never forget. "You've got something people can't fake. You don't come from privilege, you come from hunger." I worked 60-hour weeks. I built the product out. I listened. I learned. I started handling pitches to VC firms. 2 years later, with a little seed funding, I left to start my own company, Northfield Analytics, with Clean Line as our flagship product. I was 23. We launched with a small team, me, 2 devs, 1 marketing contractor. I still remember our first client, a furniture distributor in Milwaukee who said our software read his accountant like a psychic. By the end of year 1, we had 30 paying clients and broke even. By the end of year 2, we were profitable. It felt unreal. Like all those nights on the couch with the busted spring and cold drafts had been worth something. Like maybe I hadn't been invisible after all. It wasn't until I turned 25 that my past came knocking. It started with a missed call from an unknown number. I ignored it. Then a Facebook message from a name I hadn't seen in almost 8 years, Caleb. He wrote, "Hey, Mom and Dad asked me to reach out. They want to talk. Things aren't great at home. I know it's been a long time." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't answer. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From my dad. "We know we weren't perfect. We know we made mistakes. Caleb's going through some things. We had to sell the house last year. We're renting now, but it's temporary. Just wanted to say we're proud of you. We've seen what you've built. Maybe sometime we could meet." Proud of me. When I was sleeping on the floor, I was being dramatic. When I applied to college behind their backs, I was selfish. When I left, they didn't even bother calling. And now that the house was gone and Caleb wasn't thriving, they remembered I existed? I didn't reply, but something in me cracked open again. Not the same way as before. Not quietly, not with tears. This time, it felt like gears shifting. Because as fate would have it, I was about to be in a position to walk right back into their lives. Not for reconciliation, but for something else entirely. 6 months after that letter, my company got approached by a mid-sized accounting firm looking to streamline fraud detection in their client portfolio. They were based in the same region I grew up in, about 30 minutes from my parents' old neighborhood. I didn't even make the connection at first. I was too deep in project mode. We had new updates rolling out. I'd just hired a second product manager, and the backend team was scrambling to scale our infrastructure. Then I saw the email from our onboarding coordinator. She'd sent over the client intake form. Client, Patterson and Langford accounting contact. Matthew Collins position, junior partner status. Company in transition, acquired new clients after several local small business closures. It didn't hit me right away. The name Collins barely registered. Then, during the kickoff Zoom call, I saw the background. The bookshelf. The fake plant in the corner. That window. I'd sat near that window once, as a kid. During a Bring Your Child to Work day, my dad took me on. He'd worked for Patterson and Langford for 18 years before he and a few others were let go in a quiet restructuring during my sophomore year. I stared at the screen, watching this younger guy in a rumpled blue shirt talk about audit automation and manual review hours. He had no idea who I was. Why would he? I kept my face neutral, asked a few questions, took notes. Then, as the call ended, he said, "We're actually trying to phase out a few legacy clients. Ones who no longer match our integrity threshold, if you get my drift." Something twisted in my stomach. I asked casually, "Any reason in particular?" He laughed and said, a few got caught doing funny things during the pandemic. One was even using his adult son's credit to open vendor accounts. Kid's got a business now, apparently. Whole family drama. Pretty nuts." I didn't flinch. I just said, "We'll get started with the data transfer by Friday." Later that night, I pulled up our internal directory, searched for the intake documents, and found what I was looking for. Patterson and Langford had submitted a trial batch of flagged accounts for testing. And guess what showed up? A vendor ID registered to Collins Construction Services, flagged under a 2020 credit anomaly tied to a fraudulent application. It was under my name. I froze. For a second, it all came flooding back. How my uncle, Darren, had borrowed my social security number for paperwork. How my parents swore it was just temporary. How I never saw a dime from whatever business he was supposedly launching. And there it was. He hadn't just borrowed my name. He'd opened 3 accounts. One of them still had an unpaid balance. $11,942. My credit had only bounced back because I'd spent the first year of college fixing it myself. I could have escalated it quietly, flagged it, filed a formal complaint. But then I remembered the floor, the couch, the silence, and how every single adult in my life back then told me to calm down when I begged them to help. I wasn't going to be quiet this time, so I started digging. Turns out, Darren's business had gone belly up in 2021, and he'd filed a personal bankruptcy shortly after. He'd been living in one of those big rental homes in a gated suburb, owned by a property investment group. Guess who recently acquired a majority share of that group? Us. Northfield Analytics had expanded into data-backed real estate investment that spring. We were piloting it in 3 cities, including the one I grew up in. So I reached out to our portfolio manager. "Do we still have that house on Laurel Ridge?" He pulled it up. "Yeah. Tenant's been spotty on payments. Some bounce backs." "What?" I said. "Let me know when the lease is up. I want to take a look at it personally." 3 weeks later, I was standing outside the house with a clipboard. It was smaller than I remembered, but the irony didn't miss me. I knocked. My aunt answered. Her face dropped. "Oh, wow. You've grown." "I'm here for a routine evaluation," I said. "Lease is up soon." Darren appeared behind her. His expression went from confusion to irritation in 2 seconds flat. "You," he scoffed. "What are you doing here?" "I co-own the investment group that owns this property," I said. "Your lease terms include a right to not renew without notice." He blinked. "Wait, are you evicting us?" "Not yet," I said calmly. "But let's just say I have options." He started to argue, but I cut him off. "You used my name, ruined my credit, blocked me when I asked for help. You thought that'd be the end of the story. It's not." I handed him a manila envelope. Inside was a full breakdown of the fraudulent accounts he'd opened using my identity. Every flagged transaction, every missed payment. A printed statement from our software that read, "Lack of financial integrity, flagged for review." His hands shook. My aunt looked like she might throw up. I walked away. Didn't slam the door. Didn't yell. Just walked. Because this time, I got to decide what happened next. After I walked away from Darren's rental, I didn't go home. I went straight to the office, pulled up our internal tenant report system, and marked his file for non-renewal. No eviction, no petty retaliation, just a clean, legal notice that his lease would end in 60 days and would not be renewed. He had 60 days to find somewhere else. And it felt good. Not in the triumphant, fire and brimstone way I'd imagined as a teenager, but in a calm, final sort of way. Like I'd finally stopped asking for permission to be angry. A week later, I got another email. This one from an address I hadn't seen in years. Subject, please read from mom.colby at something. I almost deleted it on sight, but something stopped me. I opened it. I know you probably hate us. I understand. But Caleb's not doing well. He dropped out of college. He's been in and out of jobs. He says he feels lost. I don't know how to help him. Your dad is looking for work again. We're staying with friends. We shouldn't have let things get so bad. I shouldn't have let you leave the way you did. I hope you're okay. Mom. There was no apology. Not really. Just guilt dressed up like concern. I didn't respond. But it got me thinking. Because the next month, I had to travel back to that town for a speaking engagement, an alumni panel at my old high school. One of my professors had recommended me to talk about startup growth, and the principal remembered me. I declined at first, but now? Now I wanted to see the place that shaped me. The school hadn't changed much. Same beige walls, same chipped lockers, but the kids looked younger than I remembered. Or maybe I just felt older. My panel went well. I kept it honest, talked about failure, rebuilding, the night I slept in my car to escape the noise. A few students stayed behind afterward to ask questions. And then, as I walked out into the parking lot, I saw him. Caleb. He was leaning against a beat-up Honda Civic with a crumpled fender, smoking something he tried to hide when he saw me. His eyes went wide. Hey, he said. I nodded. Hey, didn't know you'd be here. Yeah, it was kind of last minute. He looked thinner than I remembered. Worn down. Not the golden child anymore. Just another guy trying to hold it together. Mom told me you bought Uncle Darren's place, he said. I did. He gave a dry laugh. Guess you finally got your room back. I didn't laugh. I didn't come here to gloat, I said. But I'm not going to pretend nothing happened either. He stuffed his hands into his jacket pockets. I was a kid. I didn't know they were screwing you over. You were old enough to know I was sleeping on the floor while you had a whole room. He didn't argue. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I built something. I worked hard for it. And I don't need anything from you. But you need to understand something. He looked at me, finally really looked. What? I'm done carrying the silence for this family. I don't care what you tell people. I don't care how you explain it. But I know the truth. And you do too. He nodded, slowly. I'm sorry, he said. I really am. I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't hug him. I just nodded back. Then I left. 2 months later, I got a letter from the IRS addressed to my company. Inside was a routine notification that someone had tried to open a line of credit using our corporate EIN. The name attached to the application? Colby and Sons Construction. Filed by Darren Colby. I smiled, filed the report, and flagged it. Some people never learn. But I had. Because in the time since I left that floor, I'd learned how to build, how to protect, how to carve out a place in the world where I wasn't just surviving. I was choosing. I was done begging to be seen. And I wasn't done yet. 3 months after that panel, I got an invitation in the mail. It was on thick, glossy cardstock, ivory with gold trim. The kind of fancy you use when you want to make something seem important, even if it's not. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Caleb Colby and Hannah Stevens. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't spoken to Caleb since the parking lot conversation. We hadn't texted. No follow-up calls. Just silence again, but this time, it wasn't mine. The return address was my parents', not his. So I knew what this was. It wasn't about reconciliation. It was about image. An olive branch painted in guilt and formality. There was a handwritten note tucked inside. We would love to see you. It would mean the world to us if you could be there. Let's start over. Love, Mom. Start over. Like we were old friends who'd just drifted apart. Like they hadn't let me vanish from their house, from their lives, without a second thought. I didn't RSVP. But I did show up, not to the engagement party, but to the house. The one they were renting now, the same place my aunt once owned, now sold off after the family fell apart. I showed up with a check. I'd recently donated to a program that provided scholarship funds to students with unstable home lives. The same kind of fund I'd once depended on. In the donor acknowledgement form, they asked if I wanted to dedicate it to someone. I wrote, to every kid who had to sleep on the floor, and still showed up the next morning. And when I rang my parents' doorbell that afternoon, I handed them a framed copy of the confirmation email. No signature, no big speech, just the document. My mom looked confused. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes tired. I don't need closure, I said, and I don't need your approval. But I needed you to see this. I made it out, on my own, and now I'm making sure other kids don't have to go through what I did. They didn't say anything. That was fine. I turned and walked back to my car. Before I got in, my mom called out, her voice cracking. You've changed. I looked back and said, yeah, I had to. That night, I sat on my balcony in the city, watching the skyline flicker. My dog, Cooper, rescued from a shelter on the day I closed my first funding round, curled up beside me. I scrolled through my phone, ignoring texts from numbers I hadn't saved. Somewhere in that silence, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was just done being defined by people who only ever saw me as convenient or expendable or less. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is move forward and let the people behind you choke on the dust. Caleb eventually got married. I didn't go to the wedding. A mutual friend sent me a photo. My parents were in the background, smiling like they hadn't ever told their firstborn son he was too dramatic for wanting a place to sleep. But I didn't care, because I wasn't looking for their faces in the crowd anymore. A few months later, I got invited to speak at a youth entrepreneurship panel in DC. One of the other guests was a guy whose story mirrored mine, except he had never left his hometown, and he'd never quite escaped the pull of people who didn't want him to succeed. He pulled me aside after and said, "How did you make it out?" I told him the truth. I stopped trying to prove them wrong. I started proving myself right. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not the speech at the reunion, not the check, not even the business, but knowing I built something when they thought I'd break. Knowing that every dollar I earn, every step I take forward, is powered by the space they never gave me. I took it anyway, and I made it mine. That's the story.